God damn it, an entire generation pumping gas, waiting tables, slaves with white collars. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need. We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no great war, no great depression. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our great depression is our lives. We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. We're slowly learning that fact. And we're very, very pissed off.
Fight Club was always one of those special movies to me growing up as a teenager. I remember being obsessed with it. I was one of those kids who had Tyler Durden on all my social media profile pictures. Yet, I didn't really understand the movie totally. When you're young, you don't question why the ultimate plan of the film was to blow up the banks and why so many men wanted to be part of a fight club. I just thought Brad Pitt as Tyler was so cool, the movie was so stylish, and the twist ending was unique, and that all things came together to make a masterpiece. The thematic interpretation, if you've not read the book, it's very much something you have to take and connect the dots yourself. And when I watched the movie recently for the first time in a while, I really felt that there is this strange connection to the film and the modern society curated on the internet. Within recent years, more than ever, the internet has been a reflection of the minds of men in the world today, and it is not a healthy image that I have witnessed. Even on my taxi driver video that started the growth on my channel, I had so many comments from vulnerable people struggling with the reality of being alone as a man in the modern landscape, or people who reacted negatively to the idea that they could be better. People who, when faced with the idea that they may have become attached to a self-destructive philosophy on life and the world around them, responded in a way that only confirmed to me that there is this viewpoint on life that has become so normalized, that everything wrong in their life is a result of the society around them, rather than their reaction to it. Nobody really has the power to change the world, so I do think you have to change the way you respond to it. And Fight Club is the perfect film that represents this mass destructiveness that comes from men's responses to the world around them. In the 1990s, before the internet was a representation of the people, film and TV was the representation of society, and consistently we saw that America was in a position where everything was going well culturally. Things were only progressing in a good way. Music was at its peak, film was at its best, the economy was booming, and the idea of capitalism in America specifically was going as well as it could have gone and much better than it does today, many years after 9/11, the Iraq War, the war in Afghanistan, the financial crash of 2008, and the pandemic. When things were going so well in the 90s, and the big year of the millennium was coming around the corner, it was as if the boredom of the people was showing through the media with films like The Matrix, American Beauty, Office Space, and Fight Club, all coming out in 1999, all featuring these characters stuck in these dead-end office jobs that symbolizes capitalism so well, shown in these films to trap their workers in this mundane and purposeless existence, only to then break out of this trap with a more free-thinking way of living their life. In the modern day, these conclusions haven't come from a shared boredom with being a cog in the machine, but actually the shared consciousness of the internet. Through the internet, everyone has sort of adopted this herd mentality. It's like everyone has clung onto different sets of made-up ideas forced onto them by the different things people are exposed to. These ideas serving as an identity for people, like how millions of people support and embrace snake oil salesmen as if they are worth idolizing, or how people embrace socially political views to shape their identity. On one side, we have people who buy gender and sex concepts as if it is a religion, and on the other side, we have people cultivating a community of intolerance. This is what the war of woke and unwoke essentially is. It's extreme tolerance versus extreme intolerance, and the whole thing is truly embarrassing, coming from someone who simply watches on from the sidelines. I've seen it myself. One side gets triggered over misgendering, The other gets triggered over the idea that the male gaze is a term that can be used to describe someone not so far from a stalker. I used the term when talking about Travis Bickle in my Taxi Driver video, simply because I thought its definition was fitting, and I had no idea it was linked to some feminist ideology, yet I had so many men whining about it in my comments, as if what I said was a personal attack. Both sides are fueling each other because they are all victim to something that comes from the same place, deep down. I think Fight Club represents this really well, despite so much of the Fight Club fan base waving the film like a flag that supports the side of anti-woke, despite the book and the film existing to actually mock essentially all extreme perspectives that have arisen in the modern Western world.
We're not your job. You're not how much money you have in the bank. Not the car you drive. Not the contents of your wallet. You're not your fucking khakis. You're the all-singing, all-dancing crap of the world.
The film starts with the narrator played by Edward Norton, stuck with a gun in his mouth. Behind the gun is Brad Pitt's Tyler Durden. The narrator describes the situation to be a hostage situation involving explosives at the base of the building. The voiceover then goes into how the narrator got himself into this position. This then brings us to Bob, a former bodybuilder who fell victim to testicular cancer and a hormone imbalance that caused him to grow man boobs. The narrator explains that he has been suffering with insomnia and that to get the sleep he needs, he goes to these meetings for people who either have serious illnesses or have survived these illnesses. The narrator not being a survivor or a victim, instead goes because to sleep, he needs to take himself to a place so low that he is able to cry, which then results in a peaceful sleep. Throughout the day, we see still, the narrator's insomnia has this destructive effect on him both physically and mentally. The narrator works a job that he sort of gets through like a zombie, walking from point A to B. There is no life in his work, so much that you can't tell whether he is just suffering from insomnia or is suffering from his life slowly being sucked away from him. As a result of such a lifeless job, the narrator has to use the money he makes to buy his life back in a sense. This shows through his shopping addiction, where he essentially lives to buy the whole IKEA catalogue. This proves to be such a worthless use of money though. He works his whole life away to buy things that don't add any value to his living. He's buying quick dopamine releases, but by the time the day comes to an end, he lays in bed trying to get to sleep, feeling hopeless and completely out of touch with the world. This is the first example of commercialism and how it has trapped the narrator in this cycle of pointless existence. The idea that someone can have an apartment filled with furniture and house appliances, despite having no friends to invite over. And having a fridge with next to no food is quite ironic. I also think that the fact the narrator spends his time at these meetings and works such an unfulfilling job really shows how negative his exposure to the real world is. He is not taking in anything good, and it's even worse when he knows that the only way he can sleep right is when he is in such despair. This is also more relevant than ever, when so many people are constantly consuming things from the internet endlessly throughout the day until we sleep. The horrors of the world, and all the sickness is right in front of your face all day, every day. And if it's not, then it's either mindless nonsense dumbing you down, or grifters using the romanticization of beauty and material possessions to profit off your envy. Having a mindless job and spending your free time sucked into the vacuum of despair through social media will break anyone mentally. Back in the 90s, this vacuum of despair came from your TV. With a TV, you can change the channel or choose to go outside, but social media follows you in your pocket, and the algorithm chooses on what you are exposed to. The narrator's life comes to a halt when he first encounters Helena Bonham Carter's Marla Singer. The narrator feels that Marla Singer's presence is a reflection of himself. She not only symbolizes the lie that the narrator lives out, pretending to be ill like the other people at these meetings, but her degeneracy also reflects his own. Marla also represents the narrator's depressive side. Just like how later Tyler Durden tends to represent the anarchist within the narrator. Tyler is the characterization of the narrator's desire to change the world around him. The narrator's heavy focus on Marla distracts him from what is actually his point in being there. There's no reason why he can't still feel this sympathy that leads him to sleep, but he gives this up when Marla appears, because he is bothered by her. The narrator falls back into this struggle of an insomniac. The narrator then confronts Marla about what she is doing and works out a deal to start going to these meetings on separate occasions so that they can avoid seeing each other. Marla does it because she is cheap and she gets free food and drinks, where the narrator has credited his life's functionality to this strange obsession. The narrator, despite having this hatred towards Marla, asks for her number, and when she asks for his real name, rather than the series of fake names he gives himself at all these meetings, the film then brings us to Tyler Durden, who appears in the narrator's life when losing his sanity during a business trip. This is not a coincidence, neither is them having the same suitcase. I remember my dad pointing this out to me when I watched the movie for the first time, which ended up spoiling the twist for me. When the narrator arrives home, not only does he lose all his things when he loses his suitcase, but he comes home to find out that in his absence, his apartment and his dear possessions were all destroyed in a freak mishap, a fire believed to have been caused by his gas-powered stove. The fact Marla's number survived brings to life the idea that the narrator has a choice between calling Marla and Tyler. This makes for a really interesting way to break into the second act of the film. The narrator essentially has a choice between continuing his life of depression or a life of anarchy. The narrator chooses the latter. The anarchy brought in this life with Tyler creates a life with no ruler. The narrator is no longer ruled by his depression or his possessions anymore, once Tyler is in his life. The narrator meets up with Tyler, and Tyler instantly shows to have strong feelings on the society created by media and pop culture. So much of what he says is in reference to pop culture, and it's all expressed with disdain. This is where we first see the mentality of the anti-capitalist and anti-consumer. The feeling that things are only getting worse in the world is felt. Tyler always speaks with some kind of urgency, yet it's all calculated. After Tyler welcomes the narrator's need for a place to stay, he asks the narrator to punch him in the face. Here the film pauses, and we find out how Tyler lives his life. Tyler essentially lives the same nightlife that the narrator lives, but instead of being miserable, he is outgoing, and is in fact quite the hustler. He works as a projectionist, where he will mockingly insert quick frames of male genitalia into kids' movies. Just like how Tyler is spliced into the film a few times before his official introduction, he is a waiter among the elite in a restaurant, and he also sells soap. Something about people who are anti-capitalists is that they are often capitalistic in their working life. It's sort of like how, if you can't beat them, you have to join them. If you know the problem, you can either sit and complain or take advantage of it. Tyler ends up convincing the narrator to punch him quite easily, and when he punches back, they start to have fun with it. This fight is like an act of freedom. It goes against everything that is normal to do. It's also as if the narrator is fighting himself and defeating the side of himself restrained by society's limits. As time goes by, the narrator goes longer and longer living a life without these material possessions that once held him down, and this street fighting he and Tyler would almost do as a joke eventually turns into an event that bystanders also get involved in. This is the first time where we see that the narrator is not the only man lost in this world, and actually many men are lost in the world of the film, even those who in the eyes of a capitalist system are doing just fine with a well-paying job that requires a suit and tie, people who probably even have a wife and kids at home, or people who are deeply religious. They are all lacking a sense of purpose because the way the system is built, it deprives so many from purpose, and devalues the things that were purposeful in the past. Why work your whole life? What actually is the goal? Once you have made the money you need, what is left? For many, there really isn't anything at the end of that tunnel. You spend so much time working that you end up never having something to actually live for in the real world. Nothing to spend your money on but things. When the narrator continues with his new life, he is no longer weighed down by the repetitive existence of being a cog in the machine that originally trapped him in this loop of despair. Fighting every weekend and living this secluded life with Tyler has recreated the same comfort he got from going to the meetings, but it has only amplified. He truly feels a sense of purpose that distracts him from the mundane existence of having a job that offers no real fulfillment. The same feeling a consumer gets on a more fraudulent and temporary level when they buy something they wanted after saving their money for it, despite not really having a true passion for that object either. By this point, Fight Club is now officially a thing. People from all over have found this freedom that is felt when living something more than a typical life. This unity between these men has all come from this camaraderie. So many of those alone in their life as an employee are now part of Fight Club, like a soldier is part of an army, or an athlete is part of a team. I do think something that lonely men feel they have lost in the modern world is this brotherhood. Throughout all of history, men fought beside each other, and this camaraderie moved mountains. It's the same power within that allowed humanity to build the pyramids. Yet now, togetherness is like a selling point. Only the need for money brings people together now. Things are now going well for the narrator, but he is still split between two minds, the depressive Marla and the sociopathic Tyler, a pair who have been spending a lot of time together to the surprise of the narrator. The fact that Marla leaves and in comes Tyler, we really see how the narrator uses Tyler to replace this depressive mindset with the mindset of an anarchist. Marla accepts this poverty and illness of life where Tyler wants to conquer the possibility of change, and the narrator is still in the middle of these two minds, despite his successes as the co-creator of Fight Club. The narrator from beginning to end, I believe to be someone trying to cope with his reality, and is always going back and forth between the desire for power and a meaningful existence, and the acceptance of his reality. You can either grow to be happy with what you have, or follow the devil blindly into hell in search for a life you feel is more purposeful. I think where things start to change is when Tyler and the Fight Club are caught in the basement of the diner where the Fight Club get-togethers take place. The owner beats Tyler to near death before Tyler earns permission to use the basement for the foreseeable future. This moment is the first example of the Fight Club looking up to Tyler as not only their leader, but someone who would fight for them. He earned their respect enough that the followers of Fight Club would do anything for him because they wanted to be like him. We see the followers' devotion to Tyler through their commitment to Tyler's request that all Fight Club members go out into the real world and pick a fight with somebody, a fight they must intentionally lose. Nobody shows more willingness to this request than the narrator, who ends up beating himself up in front of his boss, which then leads to him getting compensated so well that the Fight Club is able to grow. The narrator has learned from Tyler, to beat the system, you have to first take advantage. Even an anti-capitalist revolution needs a large money source to fund its efforts. The members of the Fight Club now start committing crimes such as the vandalization of commercial goods and advertising. Tyler and the narrator even threaten a convenience store worker's life in an attempt to persuade him into going after his ambitions, rather than settling for the easy money of a widely available job.
If you're not on your way to becoming a veterinarian in 6 weeks, you will be dead. Now run on home.
Run, Forrest, run!
I feel ill.
Imagine how he feels.
Come on, this isn't funny. That wasn't funny. What the fuck was the point of that?
Tomorrow will be the most beautiful day of Raymond Castle's life. His breakfast will taste better than any meal you and I have ever tasted.
With a loyal following formed, the anarchism begins. They are trying to fight back against the capitalist world that they felt broke them in their past lives, and this actually helps grow their cause because they are being seen. Members of the Fight Club even start waiting outside of the abandoned house the narrator and Tyler have been living in, so that they can get close to Tyler and get higher in the ranks of the whole organization that is developing. The anarchist teachings form into this cult-like, almost military level of obeying all command. letting go of old and accepting new. People are abandoning their possessions and their jobs to be soldiers in the fight against the society they already felt failed them. Some simply want to be part of something greater than themselves. The Fight Club went from an escape from the norm to a revolution, a new norm entirely. The narrator disapproves of it, feeling that Tyler is starting to be one step ahead of him. The anarchy and the hate for Western society is getting out of control for the narrator as he loses the connection with Tyler, even feeling the members below him are getting a bit too close to Tyler, which he expresses violently when he brings one close to death. With this member being the pretty boy who is brutalized, it takes you back to the world of the film set up at the start, a world so bleak and lacking any sense of joy. You really feel the members of the Fight Club joined in search of feeling important, but the reality is harsh. To be part of a group is truly to be a pawn. Only the leader is really getting something out of it. The members of the Fight Club feel freedom in Tyler's idea of liberation, but it's all a lie. Tyler constantly takes the worst of society and uses it to his advantage, and there is no better example than the group itself. He knows the sickness of the world well enough to know that preaching about it can lead insecure people to become followers and benefactors to a cause with no real solution to the problem it seeks to fix. This is happening a lot with the internet gurus posing to be martyrs to a cause, and the political crybabies. The constant exposure to the ideas of those who think they are above you is creating this level of insecurity in people where they feel they need to be part of something to escape their own deteriorating self-esteem. You see this through the extreme projection of religious and political beliefs online. So many people feel they need to make it clear that they are part of one group, and to be part of another group is the worst thing someone can do. It's a constant back and forth of hate through a narrow perception of the actual truth. The people of the Fight Club and the slaves of Project Mayhem very clearly have no knowledge of politics and philosophy. Their actions are all a result of the information that is fed to them by Tyler. The narrator confronts Tyler about the sudden extremism of Project Mayhem, and it damages their relationship for the rest of the film. After this, Tyler disappears, and the narrator's involvement in the Fight Club seems to have been put on a hiatus. Now he has to deal with life without his partner in crime, and the rise of the cult followers bringing Project Mayhem to life under the narrator's own roof. The death of Bob only furthers the cult-like dedication Tyler's followers have to the cause. With Tyler's absence, they have a new martyr. This time, a true martyr who actually died for the cause. The narrator decides to track Tyler down by revisiting all of Tyler's flight destinations. It turns out that Tyler has been networking throughout the whole country, creating fight clubs everywhere, in an attempt to solidify the power of Project Mayhem nationally. There is a bar in every city where it is very clear that a fight club resides. The narrator asks everyone he meets about Tyler, and they all seem to know something he doesn't, until one bartender claims to have met the narrator a week prior. The bartender reveals to the narrator that the narrator is actually Tyler Durden. The narrator asks Marla about it, and even she tells him the same. And here comes Tyler, the narrator's imaginary friend, the characterization of the narrator's desire to shape the world in his own image. This reveal is very obvious actually, you can see it coming a mile away if you really pick up on things. But when you watch the film completely blind, you're not thinking that a twist or a reveal could be what this is all leading to. Still after this reveal, the narrator's split personality is still present. He is now battling the actions of his unconscious self. The narrator tries to protect Marla from the evil that he has created, but to explain the situation is an impossible task. At this point, Tyler's influence is round every corner. It's as if half of all men have joined the cause. The narrator visits the police to warn them of the terrorist attacks to come and explains the plan to blow up the headquarters of all the major banks in an attempt to reset the national debt and create financial equality. In reality, things don't work like that, but it's a fun, climactic set piece that rounds up the anti-capitalist agenda of the film, and more specifically, the source material the film is based on. We see that Tyler's influence has even made it into the police force when the police turn on the narrator and try to cut off his balls. the narrator makes a lucky escape and heads for the location project mayhem is planned to commence. Tyler is there to stop the narrator in his tracks at every turn. This is the anarchist within the narrator trying to turn himself away. There is truly a part of the narrator that wants this terrorist attack to happen. Tyler the whole time has just been the person the narrator wished to be. Tyler is this prophetic figure of great power. The influence he has is that of a genius sociopath, and someone as weak as the narrator looks up to that. I think the narrator, knowing it is himself doing this, and knowing he is doing it without having control of it, is what really stops him. He knows it's bad because it's not truly him in control, but Tyler and the narrator deep down are the same. They want the same thing ideologically. Tyler is the only one willing to create enough mayhem to make these desires a reality. After the narrator fights himself, we find him in the same place as the start of the film, where he is strapped to a chair with a gun in his mouth. In reality, the narrator is watching over the city and these buildings, thinking of what he has done while holding the gun in his own mouth. But his men are bringing Marla to him. The person he used to be is still at the back of his mind. He is still attached to the side of himself who was simply depressed in a world that shapes people that way. The narrator realizes that it is better to accept that the world is what it is, and that depression is in fact a normal part of life. It's something you can work on, just like you work through the obstacles of your life. There is no resolve in destruction, and Tyler's concept of freedom is built on violence. It legitimately takes a sociopath to find joy from violent acts. When the narrator sinks to the lowest pit of despair, he decides to kill the anarchist within, kill the dictator he has been trying to be through Tyler. So he shoots himself in the face, killing Tyler. I've heard people say that it is a plot hole that Tyler dies from this, when the narrator only shoots himself in the cheek. But Tyler is completely imaginary. His life force is totally a fragment of the narrator's inflated ego. For the narrator, he just has to convince himself that Tyler is gone, and shooting himself in the face is enough to do that. The members of Project Mayhem are greeted by the narrator with a hole in his face as they bring Marla to him. They show concern, but the narrator tells them to leave him and Marla for a moment to be alone together. Before the narrator is able to explain why he shot himself in the mouth, the buildings of the major banks blow up, and we see the narrator and Marla come together for a moment. It's the moment that the narrator is finally able to embrace the depressive side of himself. His edgy phase is over, and he actually got what he wanted. He did destroy the banks and achieve his plan, and it may even be possible that he gets away with it due to the influence he spread within the police like we saw before. Fight Club to me is more relevant than ever because of this shared insecurity within men in the modern era. So many guys out there seem like they are offended by everything. The amount of people present on the internet who show extreme weakness in themselves is way too common, and it honestly makes sense. When you see the worst of people, you show the worst of yourself in response to it. There's so much propaganda out there, it's everywhere. Every little video is shaping your worldview, even if it's not intended. The amount of girls who romanticize their physical prowess and their aesthetics has created such an ugly divide between the beautiful and the normal. Everything is aesthetic now. It's the worst side of commercialism making its way into your subconscious. Men are guilty of it too, by doing steroids and showing off their physique and their lifestyle, as if life is a competition. It's all selling you an idea, and when there is such a clear difference between you and who you perceive as special, we're all becoming more divided and made more alone than ever. This is the same thing that would have made Bob a steroid-using bodybuilder, whose desire of being perfect is what likely led to his cancer diagnosis. When your headspace is dictated by the constant exposure of life, as you don't know it, those who want to shape the world and the people in their own image are then able to come and use your disillusionment to mold you into a bitter person. And these people themselves are either bitter people or, again, capitalists looking to take all your money either through sex and the false idealization of feminism, or entrepreneurialism and the false idealization of masculinity. This is all nonsense. It's not the real world. Start thinking about removing your perception of the world away from the internet, because it will rot your mind. And if you're vulnerable enough, you'll be taken advantage of by someone much smarter and much less empathetic than you can imagine. The reason why Tyler and the narrator were ultimately the same person was because the narrator's suffering was a self-inflicted suffering that was only a response to a capitalist society. It wasn't society's fault that he became so deranged. It was his response to it. My point remains from the taxi driver video. You are in control of how you respond to everything. No matter how bad it is, you choose to live the life you live. If you do not have control of the way you think of the world, you at least have control of what you expose yourself to. This is Mansplaining Movies. Like the video, subscribe, and more importantly, comment. I'd love to hear any feedback. What do you think of Fight Club? How do you see its relevance in the modern day? I want to hear anything you've got to add. I honestly just make these videos to talk about my favorite movies, and if they hold significance over a fan base or myself, I'm going to mention it. Try not to take every single word to heart. Let me know what you think.